Hello, my name is Father Nick Nelson, and I am the Director of Vocations for the Diocese of Duluth, Minnesota. I'd like to share a few tips on discernment, on life, on following the Lord. The first is that you only get one shot at this life. The world says you only live once, YOLO. And it's true, but not in the way that the world thinks of it. The world thinks of it as you need to soak this life up for all its pleasure, fulfillment, happiness, experiences, all that. What we mean by it, what Christ means by it, is you only get one shot in this life to store up as much treasure in heaven as is possible. And what we realize is when we look at the saints, we look at Christ, is that everything we sacrifice in this life will be rewarded in the next. Everything. Every little sacrifice we make will be rewarded. We can merit greater and greater beatitude in heaven. So it's not just about doing the minimum and slipping into heaven, making a good confession, doing our time in purgatory, and being purified and being in eternity in heaven for all life. But it's a matter of meriting all the graces and greater charity in our heart so that we can have greater beatitude, we can experience the greater glory of God for all eternity. Some sort of specific tips or understanding how we actually discern God's will in our life. It's easy when it's like black or white, okay? Get drunk or don't get drunk. Hit this person or not, right? But when we're talking about various goods, discerning which good to choose, that's a little more difficult. We need to realize God uses our thoughts, our feelings, and our desires. Very rarely is it some audio type of voice we hear God telling us what to do. But if we're in a state of grace, if we're receiving the sacraments, confession, Holy Communion over and over on a regular basis, if we're committing ourselves to daily prayer, giving the Lord the time to kind of move us, and if we're truly open to what God wants for us, His will, what He's calling to us as far as a vocation, then more and more we can be more certain, if you will, that what our thoughts, desires, and feelings are, where that's moving us towards, whether that is towards the priesthood or towards marriage, we can have more confidence that's from the Lord and not my own selfish ego. I hope that makes sense. We can never, in a sense, have this 100% moral certainty unless we hear a voice. But we can have more and more confident that what I'm feeling, what I'm being drawn to, isn't just my selfish desires, but rather God. And that happens because we're in a state of grace. We're hearing His voice. We're seeking to follow Him. We're truly open to His will and not my own. One beautiful thing I've experienced more and more in my priesthood, now 10 years ordained, is the fulfilling nature of being totally given over to the Lord, consecrated, if you will, set apart. Especially when it comes to chaste celibacy. Our sexual nature is such a significant part of us. We see that in the world in a very distorted view. But it's such a big part of us that to say, no, I'm going to, in a sense, sacrifice a wife and kids to be totally given over to the Lord. The longer I'm a priest, the more I experience and value that. And it's a beautiful thing. There's this chosenness, there's this being special to the Lord in that regard, that I'm given over into the Lord in such a profound way that I'm not haven't given myself to someone else, but I've given myself totally to the Lord. My last tip of advice is just to realize that it takes an incredible amount of supernatural faith to be a priest these days. To be a Christian, but especially a priest. I've been graced with I truly think it's a grace, such a rock-solid faith. But it's so important. It's so important. Because of the challenges, the difficulties, both in the world but in the church today, it's very easy for a priest to get discouraged. So you need to have that supernatural faith to to propel us on to say, okay, I may not be seeing fruit here or there. It may be sparse at my small parish, and all I have is some older women in the pews. But we need to know that what we're doing is worthwhile, even if we don't see the fruit. Mother Teresa famously said, God calls me to be faithful, not successful. I'm reminded especially of the North American martyrs, especially Isaac Jogues. I've read a historical novel on him, Saint Among Savages, and that how he, for a year almost, one time he was away from his community, couldn't even celebrate Mass. All he was doing is baptizing a few people here and there on their deathbed of the natives, preaching here and there, really no fruit whatsoever. But he was never discouraged. He realized that that was what God called him to do. And he had that supernatural faith to truly believe that what he was doing was worthwhile, and it was building up the kingdom, even if he could not see with his eyes. And now I am certain, him being a great saint in heaven, he sees that how God used him. He's seen the fruit and how he built up the kingdom, even if he wasn't seeing it in front of him. And so that rock solid supernatural faith in which to see that what you're doing as a priest is worthwhile.